everyone, and welcome back to the Grateful Not Greedy podcast. My name is Chris, and I am here with my very referable, solid recommendation kind of co-host, and her name is...
Rachel, I Chris. Wow, thanks. I'll take your
You're
referral
so
any day.
welcome. You are so welcome. Well, I introduced you that way, Rach, because today I have a topic, something that's been brewing with me a little bit, and I thought this is, once again, a Grateful Not Greedy conversation, and you are poised to help me with this. So, a little story. This week I was at an awards ceremony. Everyone's graduating high school and college. At the end, they give all these different awards for all this stuff. And so there were all these really cool awards and by class, and then all these scholarships got awarded and all that stuff. And then simultaneously this week, I'm kind of dealing with people who need a reference for like a job, or they need support to, do some business stuff or whatever. So I've been kind of into getting all that input information. And as I'm watching those awards and reviewing that information, it struck me that there's this chasm, if you will, between knowing and being like expert or being really good at what you do and not. And this and that not is really important, because that is the fake it till you make it pause.
Yeah.
In my estimation, right? So you have, like, you're going along, and maybe you've gone to college and you've taken some classes, and you know more than a lot of people who haven't taken those classes, but you don't know more or as much as other people in the industry or other people in that field. So I kind of have that thing going on. And then I'm watching all these scholarships, and I'm like, the scholarship is also based on potential. It's rewarding you for what you've done, but it's based on the fact that you're going to continue that and go to college, and you may or may not do well in college. I mean, I hope you do, because you got a scholarship, but you're still going to be in that fake it till you make it, right? Because now you're telling someone, well, I was this good in high school, and I'm expected to be this good in college, and here's my scholarship to show. So I think if I could kind of drill it down, something that the grateful not greedy conversation is, if I have someone who is asking me for a reference, which I do right now, I have someone asking me for a reference for a job, and I really like this person. I think they'd be great. And the particular job I have is like, it's like front office kind of stuff. I mean, I think they'd be great at it. There are some things that I would, I don't want to say advice, recommend to this person to support their application based on who they are and what they have. But that person also has to come in and sell themselves. And without that, so what do I do? Because, I'm always kind of struck with, particularly those of us who think that we have, good information to pass along, and we think it's going to be so relevant to people, or think they're going to really benefit from this, but particularly in the areas of like marketing, relationship marketing, some of these business things. I feel like I have a pretty good handle on it, right? So there are some areas where I feel like, okay, that's kind of a sweet spot. And I do know that some of my well-earned advice would be worthwhile. So do I sit back and not, well, how do I handle that? Because I want to help this person. They haven't necessarily asked for my help, Rachel. They've just asked me for a recommendation. But I can't, in good faith, give them the recommendation that I know they need to get this job, because they aren't where I can give them that recommendation. So I can give them a softer recommendation. And this is a really good conversation for all of us, like trying to get any kind of thing, trying to get I don't know, trying to get meetings done, or maybe you're on a board somewhere, or maybe you're just trying to negotiate with your neighbor about a fence. I don't know, but I can get you so far. But how do we manipulate the fake it till you make it part? Because we also have to be confident about being able to interview, being able to sell ourselves, being able to convince people that we can do it. But we always say in relationships, you're not buying potential, right? Like, don't go for potential. We say it all the time, right? But in this scenario, there is that avenue of potential that we're kind of buying in. So do I give advice? Yes or no? What do you do in the in that fake it till you make it kind of piece? And then what do you do if you really can't legitimately give someone the reference that they're asking for.
Yeah, I think the really interesting part is the fake it till you make it. And you're like, don't, in relationships, don't don't chase potential, right? But in business, you have to, because I feel like there's more that no one there's growth there, right? And that's like when I was hiring people and building teams, I'm like, I had to hire for potential. You
Oh,
have to,
clearly.
right? And
Definitely.
so
Yes.
there is the piece of that like I enjoyed developing people into the next level or next opportunity for their career. I could see the potential and I'm like, I can work with that and I can give them the space to grow there. And that's the hard thing is like when you're talking about this reference, there is a point, yes, fake it till you make it. Like you're going to have to make that leap at some point. And to get the
Right.
next job, you have to stretch, right? And
Yes.
when you stretch everything. You not just stretch your like confidence, your ability, the piece that you're like, yeah, I can totally do that. Like you have no idea if you can because you've never done it
You
before.
don't.
But,
You don't.
that
Yeah.
has to happen. There's no way to avoid that. I mean, you probably could if you did small, tiny incremental growth, but that's not how we grow in business. We do
No.
leaps. And so
Yes.
what she is asking for, your friend is asking for, um, is not like uncommon by any way, shape, or form. I think for you though, your level of, like, when you say someone is this and, like, you put your, like, word of
Yeah.
name of approval on it,
Definitely.
that carries a lot of
Yes.
weight for you because of who
Sure.
you are. It has
Right.
nothing to do with her, and what she's
Nope.
doing is exactly what 99.9% of the, like, people do. But for
Yeah.
you, I think you have a very high bar, and if you get Chris's endorsement it means a lot to you because your word is I know you. Your word
Yeah.
is you, right? And so I think that
Correct.
that's where the struggle
Yes.
is for
This is very
you is
insightful. Yes.
for you personally. But I do
It's like
think
an
there's
integrity piece on what you're talking about in here because and I think that's where the slide is for me because the fake it till you make it is on them. And if I'm going to hire them and bring them into my team, I appreciate what you're saying. Of course, fine. Yeah, then I'm taking that on. I know that I can develop you and I'm going to spend a year with you or 6 months with you. And I know that, I know where I can get with you. Great. But in a situation where I'm not going to be your manager, I'm not going to be your boss, I'm not going to be a part of your team, I'm going to give you off to someone else and especially if I know the other person. But even, but if I don't, you're so right. This is a grateful, not greedy conversation. Wow. Because it is not only my obligation, but what's my interest? How could I be of use here? Right. Because we've talked about this about boundaries and about having clear communication. It's not a struggle for me to tell that person who is applying I've looked at your resume and I need to ask you 4 or 5 questions. Okay. Answer to the questions. Okay. This is what I'm seeing is missing. If I'm on the other side and I'm hiring you, this is what I'm looking. This is what the misses are. This. This is how I would combat that, either in an interview response or in an actual, doable task. This is how I would combat that. So I think that helps, I guess. But a lot of times, or all the time, no one is asking me to fill in that gap for them. And this conversation could easily take a turn because the filling in the gap is the fake it till you make it. I'm not even asking you to fake it. I'm going to tell you how to make it, right? I'm going to tell you how to make it. You don't even have to fake it. The only faking part you have to do is just trusting me to get you over the line into that part where I know that you can shine. I know that you can make it right. This brings up a really good insight too about the fake it till you make it is fake it, yes. Fake it with awareness. Fake it with awareness. What are my blind spots? What are my weaknesses? Where will I struggle in this project or in this role? And knowing that, getting mentorship in early, then, you're not, yes, you have to make the leap. Of course, you have to make the leap. But it's always better, in my estimation, to make the leap with open eyes. If I'm going to jump over the Grand Canyon, I kind of want to know generally how big that is. I don't wanna get halfway over the canyon and then say, "Oh, shoot, I didn't realize this would only get me halfway, and now I'm falling on my face," and not only have I lost that opportunity, but I've lost a lot of other this is the other thing I don't think people understand. When you're asking people to put their name behind you or to support you, if you do it too soon, or if you kind of what's that word? Kind of like you blow it all out in the first time, then you've lost all those incremental reference points because now you've leapfrogged. You couldn't hit the lily pad. So now you're back, and now anything I say is not nearly as helpful. I can't sell it as well because I said this and now it's that, and I just kind of have to let you swim around on those lily pads. But it's important to fake it maybe with like consciously fake it and be grateful that you can see your your missteps, or grateful that you can see your weaknesses, which is so hard for
Mhm.
all of us because they're within us, right? So I think we can often identify our discomforts like, oh, I'm really uncomfortable there. I just don't feel like so confident in that area. But that might not even be a weakness. Those might just be things that you don't have the confidence on. Doesn't mean you can't do them. So yeah, flesh that out a little bit too, because I especially, I have kids in high school, college, I have their friends, we have ways to support a lot of kids and people just in the world in general. And even doing this podcast, I feel like we can support a lot of people. So, how do we do that constructively in a way that allows people to continue to grow into their potential while still being conscious and cognizant of what they have to do? And I think another relevant piece of this conversation is how to graciously accept coaching, how to graciously and, like powerfully take advice from people who are well meaning and well aligned to offer it to you.
Well, and I think part of it is not just take it, but I don't think it's the take it part. I think it's the ask for it part. I think people
Okay.
don't ask for the true feedback, um,
Correct. I agree
which
with
I
you.
think is happening in your scenario that you're talking
Maybe you're
about. That
right.
like,
Yes.
so it's not the accepting it; it is the asking for it. And then, of course, then next comes accepting it. But I think
Accepting
the
it. Yeah.
first step that is not done is people are not really asking for that feedback. They just want to go on to the next. And
Mhm.
missing that feedback loop, that loop where you can, I call it feed forward, because the idea is it's not feeding back. Like, yes, it's based on
You're
something in
right.
the past, but it's going to help you move forward. So, feed forward, like people, it's just not done.
Mhm.
And people, especially when I have had interacted with younger people newer in the workforce or coming into the
Yes.
workforce, it's
First
not
job. Yeah.
something, and I don't know if that's happening because of the different, like, maybe there's less in that in school, maybe there's less of that, happening in these days, but I feel like that process has gotten a little bit lost of it's like on to the next without examining how we did in the past. And that might be just the feeling of like, we gotta go, next thing next, the attention, the lack of ability to look back on something, like, especially when it's think like younger generation,
Yeah.
they
Just
are
spend time and
constantly like
process it. Yeah.
it's constantly stuff throwing at them. So they're never
Mhm.
examining, or they don't have as much space and time to examine the past. And it's probably a skill that they haven't developed.
Your point is really good in here too about, uh, in my estimation, so much of the emphasis is on the ask. And it's oh, I need to be so bold to send that email or to make that phone call and ask for a reference. And oh, you need to reach out to these people. You need to network. You need to that. But
Mhm.
people underestimate these either informational interviews or these, like you're saying, the feed forward interviews where you legitimately, instead of sending me something and saying, hey, can you be a reference for this job? I mean, if you're someone that works for me, obviously, and you've worked for me for fine, yes, of course I can, but if you're someone who is kind of outside of my direct work circle, I don't necessarily know your work. Maybe I know it a little bit, whatever. what would be much more powerful, and this goes for relationships, this goes for your life, whatever, what would be much more powerful is, "Hey, Chris, here's my resume. Here's the job I'm looking for. Would you be willing to give me a mock interview? Would you be willing to take a look at these 2 things and give me an idea of what you think I might have to do in this role? What should I be prepared for in this interview?" That to me would be a lot better, as an ask, like a lot better time spent than just asking me for a reference. What am I gonna do with a reference? You know what? I'm gonna call that person, I'm gonna say, "Here's what's on their resume. Yeah, they've done this, they've done that. I know them personally, they're a really nice person." Okay, okay. You know,
Yeah,
like,
but I know
right?
you won't
You
fill
know,
in the
and
gaps
I
of
can
things
tell
that
you, I
weren't.
know for sure I have done very well getting people jobs when I'm convinced that they're the right person. I know exactly what that person's gonna ask about. I know before they've even asked me, I've told them what they need to know about this person, but really, how does this person fit into that role and why this person is excellent and why you're never gonna have to question it and all that stuff. So yeah, your point, and this is like, goes back even to some of our graduation advice. It's like you have all these great aspirations, but so much is lost in the progress of learning. And if you're spending all your time faking it, you cannot make it. You cannot just fake it and fake it and fake it and fake it. I was thinking that as I'm watching all these scholarship awards and everything. And, yes, I guess a GPA is somewhat finite, I guess. You could rank people conceivably, but not really, which is why I love sports because sports, there's no arguing if someone beat you in the mile or they didn't. There's no arguing if someone threw a 50, yard pass and you threw a 30. There's no arguing if someone, made that goal or they didn't, right? Like it is what it is. And in life, the rest of life, a lot of life, even in grades and transcripts and all that, there's a lot of flexibility in that, like a lot of flexibility of these how these things are measured and how it even comes across. So the faking is you got to have a way to evaluate, are you faking it or are you legitimately on the path to making it? Like where are you on that line, and are you making the correct progress for you, and are you using your resource, because I'm a resource, you're a resource, are you using your resources appropriately when you need them? Are you using, say, me or you at the third line interview and maybe someone else at a different line interview? Like there's just so much to this conversation, and it's stressful for me because I want to help everybody. I do. I want to help everybody. I have a lot of insights. I have a lot of things to say. Obviously, we run a whole podcast about all the stuff that we have to say, but it's how do I know who wants it? How do I know who is going to take it? And do I just start kind of offering it, which I have. I've been hiring for some positions recently where I'm interviewing a lot of people off cold resumes. I don't know these people. And I feel like pretty generous. And if they're not going to get this job, like, here, look, if you're still interested in this is what's missing. This is where you can expand your skills. This is where you can get people's attention. This is where you can be in communication with me about the steps that you're making. And I do have one person that has been very forward about, okay, I did that. You said to do that. I did that. And now you mentioned that it might be helpful for me to get these skills. So I talked to this person. I talked to this person. I'm going to be able to have this meeting. I'm going to be able to go to this conference. I'm going to da, 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 I'm going to be able to learn this. Great. I mean, I'm so amazed. This is the other point. It doesn't take a lot to be really impressive because so few people want to spend time in this progress point. They just want to, like you said, jump from 0 to 100 and then maybe fail or maybe not, and maybe it's someone else's fault or whatnot. But they don't want to take all those little micro progress points to get better and to be prepared and to be ready for when all
Yeah.
these opportunities show up.
Yeah. It's, I'm going to relate this to something totally different, not to business. But a friend of mine was dating a guy and they broke up and he asked for feedback. And she was like, "Should I give it?" And I was like, "Well, he asked for it. I would say lay it out. Like, be honest." Right?
Be honest. Yeah. I,
Yeah.
I
And she
actually love
was.
that.
Yeah, she was. And it went well. But then afterwards, the interesting thing is she was like, "I don't want to ask him the feedback." And I was like, "You don't have to." And she was like, "Well, what is that about?" And I was like, "Well, it's because you don't respect him."
Right. Yeah.
And, that's the other piece is, and I'm not saying this person asking a recommendation of you doesn't respect you, but it's interesting that in order for someone to ask for feedback and to really take it, they have to respect the other person. They
Mhm.
have to recognize
Yep.
that the other person has valuable insight and input. And, I mean, imagine, because, I come from the dating world, right?
Yeah,
So,
totally. But this
like,
is it. This is like that's how I always view job interviews are like that's like a dating thing.
it
That's like,
is.
or
It is. And,
do we
you
want to
know,
get married or engaged or just go on a couple dates? I mean, I don't know. I'm going to find out in this interview. Yes,
exactly. I mean, it is. It is a sense of
it
like getting
is.
to know someone. And that's what an interview is. Like you're trying to get to know someone and figure out if there is a fit there. And same with dating, right? And so the question, like the interesting thing is you're talking about this. I was like, huh, I haven't asked for feedback. Like, but then part of it is I was like, I got what I needed from it and I learned from it and that's it.
Hmm.
But,
Right.
the difference is like, you don't tend to use these people as references. Like, "Here's my reference." Like,
We should. I
um,
mean,
it would be
I would
interesting.
ask that if I were dating. I would say, "What would your ex say about you? What would your,
True,
what would
that's
your last new
you
girlfriend
giving
say
that.
about you?"
Yeah, but that's you giving it third hand, right? Or, like, that's not a direct, like
That's not me, like, scoping on the internet and looking on the
no,
Facebook and Instas
it
and
would be
hitting
like,
him in DMs and saying,
"No,
"Hey, what
no,
do you know
not
about that
behind
guy?"
the scenes." Like, honest and open, be like, "Could I call
I'm
your
sure
ex?"
people do
Yeah.
it.
I'm sure they do it in the background, but imagine if it was done like, "Send me it's someone you dated, like, their information, I wanna contact them." Like, it would be super interesting to hear the response of, like, what was that about? And, like
100%.
but we don't do that, right?
No, and even if we did, we'd probably like, to your point, we'd probably disregard it because we'd make up excuses or reasons that this person was going to be biased or prejudiced or judgmental or something, and we're only gonna be listening for what we wanna be listening for, and then when they
Maybe
go in a
yes.
different direction,
Yeah.
right, we're looking to
Maybe
what's
yes,
that
maybe
word,
no.
you have, like, your bias and you're trying to, get it confirmed, right? It's confirmation bias, right? So, yes. I like this guy. I think he's a good guy. I want you to say the same thing. And now when you start to say things that I have to move my mental map a little bit, I don't like it. So I'm going to make excuses about you. That there's a
Well,
reason that you're saying this.
and do
Not that
you
it's true.
think though, when people give references, especially when they've been through an interview process and like decided this person's a good fit, I sometimes feel like the references are like just a quick checkbox. Like they're not really
Oh,
true.
yeah.
Right.
Well,
So,
and
I
I
mean,
mean, even
that's your
legally,
like to
there's
your
not a lot that you
point.
can say. A lot of
Yeah.
times your hands are tied even with that. Would you hire this person again? Yes or no? Like, I can't disparage that person with you. Like, there's a lot of things I can't say, but I can pump them up, which
I
is
know. And you
that's the
can, and
point.
that's all great, but to go back to what you were saying about confirmation bias, like once you've decided to hire someone, going through that process of like
Yes.
looking at recommendations. So I guess to go way back to the beginning of where we started is like being a reference, like, does it really matter? Because how much do their references really make a difference?
Well, I think
And
if you're in the middle of the process, they make a lot of difference because I think you get a reference. I don't know. We always look at references.
yeah,
I think they make
I'm
a
not
lot of
saying
difference.
you don't, but
Yeah,
when do you look at them? Do you look at them in the beginning, the middle, the end?
about a third of the way through.
Okay. Most of the
Yeah, about
time
a
it's
third of the
done
way through.
towards
Like
the
once you
end.
know that someone you even want to be talking to, then so that's like an initial thing. Then this person likes them. Okay, that looks like it's working. Then the references. Then the more technical interviews.
Got it.
Yeah,
So it is a lot of the time, I would say in business, they were done at the
yeah,
very end, right?
exactly.
And so then you're
Yeah,
just like, it's a formality. It's just like
yeah.
or are there, it's like when you have a tenant moving in, it's like, do they have any bankruptcies? That's basically what you're
Right, you're
doing,
gonna get the
right?
background check and yeah.
Yeah, it's just like kind of like the background check. But going back to, sideline on that, full sideline is like, what is the point? There's the feedback and then or feed forward and then there's the reference. And for you it sounds like what you are looking for is for someone to say, I would like you to be a reference. Can before you I ask you to do that, can you give me feed forward on the job I worked
Mhm.
on with you or how I worked for you or whatever? And that will actually give the person insight into what kind of reference you will be, and what
Yes.
areas they have growth for. But that's not typically how it's done. It's not typically, people are like, "Can you give me some feed forward or feedback on this?" And then I'm gonna ask you to be my reference or not, would be
Right.
a really good process to follow. But it's usually just reaching out to people and be like, "Hey, will you be my reference?" And you're
I
like,
know. Yeah, I think we're giving really solid advice here. I'm gonna take it because it's true. If I tell my kids this when they're in high school and they're trying to get, reference letters for, a job or for their college applications. It's not, "Hey, Professor so and so or Mr. so and so, my English teacher, will you write me a recommendation?" It is, "Mr. So and so, I've been in your class for X amount of time. I've really enjoyed this class. I've enjoyed this particular this, and this about it. And I would really appreciate if you could give me a reference. Would you be able to give me an outstanding reference in your class?" That's the question. That's the question. It's not, "Can you give me a reference?" Because anyone can give you a reference. Sure, they can. But now you put it to, and if they say no, now you can have a dialogue. You could say, "Well, great. Then that means I don't know. Does that just mean it's you? Because I think we're vibing. And you just told me no." So, okay, now I have something to look at. This is true in life too. You're so right about like the dating and the relationships and stuff. I wish we could have more transparent conversations this way without them being charged and emotional and all that because but again, it's a trust issue. Do you trust this person to give you the information that is accurate and valid for you and that is specific to you? Because if you ask a teacher, "Are you able to give me an outstanding reference?" I mean, you look at people whose transcripts are stacked and they, I don't know, play 3 sports and whatever, they don't get into this college or that college. It's like, you're kinda scratching your head, like, "What about that?" And I think, there must have been something in those references that didn't support what was on all those transcripts, because it's one thing to have, some grades here and there, have a great SAT, because that's, somewhat objective. Not completely, but, at least there's a value there. And, if you're able to ask your teacher, "Would you be able to give me an outstanding recommendation?" That needs to say, "Chris is an outstanding candidate for et cetera, et cetera." And they're kind of almost done after that sentence, and then it's like, "Okay, done." But if that person, they should say no. This is kind of my point though too, Rach. So if someone comes to me and they say that, "Would you be able to give me an outstanding reference for this business I have or this job I have?" I, being me, am gonna say yes or no. But I'm not gonna say it even at the outset. I'm gonna say, "Well, let me see, what are you asking me? What are you asking me to refer you for? Like, what are the elements that you want me to get across?" Because I might be able to refer you as a really nice person. I might be able to refer you as maybe a leader on the team, but I'm not gonna be able to refer you for, this other level of task that you're looking to get or this other, more comprehensive position that you're looking to get, and that's the faking. That's the faking. So, like how can you balance? It's true for all of us as we're having this conversation. I'm thinking about, even in my life, the times when I'm faking it ish. Because there's a learning process, I mean, I'm, even as a nurse, so we're always learning new skills. There's always a point spot where you're like, I'm doing my first, second, or 15th. I'm not yet doing my 100th of this, right? When you're doing your 100th or even your 10th, a lot of times it's like, okay, I pretty much can do this again and again and again. But so much of that just comes from your experience of life and where you can push and where your skills are and drawing from other stuff. But when you're starting out in your career, you just don't have as much of that. And my impression, could be totally wrong. My impression is often when people are early on in their careers, especially in your like mid 20s, I had the same bit of hubris, guaranteed. When you're like 24, 25, 26, you think you know everything. Like you think you know everything. You really do, right? And it's important to recognize when you're in that space that it's very possible and most likely that you do not. And this is actually the sweet spot, I feel like, of this conversation of where we're talking about, because those kind of ages I feel like are the least accepting and interested in coaching, and they probably have the most to gain
Yeah.
in that,
Sure.
post college, if you went to college, or like early on in your career, if you didn't go to college, like you've done your apprenticeships and you're kind of like starting off a little bit more, that's the time when you really could benefit from solid advice, great mentoring, very consistent setup of tasks for you to kind of complete to continue on with your career. And that's when you're least likely, to your point, to ask for it. So that's kind of a caution to me as we're having this conversation. It's like, and not to be like, oh, there's certain ages that do or don't, but to be grateful for the opportunity. Great, thank you. Sure, I'd love to help you. I'm grateful that you asked me, but I'm not going to be greedy that I have to have all the answers for you, or I'm not going to be greedy that you are going to be the person who isn't faking any of this, right? Because the whole point of looking for a new job is because your old one you've grown out of, or, it's not a good fit or whatever, right? So your point is really well taken there too. It's like that is a leap. It's a leap of faith. It's a leap of skill. It's a leap of geography a lot of times. And to do all that and to do it well is really benefited by some solid help and mentorship and being open, which we talk about so much on this podcast. And I would venture to guess that the people who I think need to listen to this most today are probably not listening. But maybe their aunt is, or maybe their neighbor is, or maybe their uncle is, or maybe their mom is. And and that's a really helpful way to be supportive in that section because you can really miss out a lot if you're not open and if you don't have flexibility in the way that you think about yourself. It's not even just like, am I good at this or not? That's almost irrelevant. It's what are you willing and capable to do to get good at what you want to do, and whether that's make money or, have an elevated title or whatever your goals are. People have all kinds of things that they're trying to do. I would say even in the medical arena, like very specifically, I've had plenty of people who want to go to medical school or they want to go to nursing school or whatever. And I know a little bit about that. So, and I've said, oh, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Have you done XYZ? And they're like, oh, that's a great idea. And then I check in with them like 6 months later, a year later. I'm like, oh, well, how'd that go? Were you able to find a publication to work on? Were you able to,
Mm.
get your emergency certification? Were you able to get some, ACLS? Or, oh, yeah, no, yeah, I haven't been able to do that yet. Like, so what have you been doing other than
Darn.
studying to become a doctor? What have you been doing other than studying to become a nurse or to be a medical professional? Because there are lots of things in there that are way outside, and everyone's studying, everyone's taking classes, everyone's doing that. Not everyone is doing the things that I'm telling you very clearly are going to set you apart.
Right.
And they just can't do it. I have another example though, and I will say this is like probably my most proud moment is going on in the last couple months with someone who really wants to work in this particular field. And I was like, okay, you're not at all ready. You really don't have almost anything except for a license. Like, okay, but everyone has a license of this type, right? But I said, how about this? How about this? Here's literally like 10 things. But I gave him one first. It's like, okay, this is your first step to kind of identify how you're going to do this. Do you even know if you're going to be good at this, right? First step. That person comes back to me. They're like, I totally did that. It was so exciting. This is what I learned from it. And now because of that, now I'm going to look at this opportunity. Do you think that's a good idea? Great. Yes, I do. I think that's an amazing idea. And now, since you have that, now you can add this thing to it. So now you're doing that, keep that flow through, and now add this thing to it. And sure enough, Rachel, that person comes back to me like 3 weeks later and is telling me that they've done that. So, like, do you not want to hire that person? Yes, you do all day long because they know everything. No, but because they know their weak spots, they know where they can be coachable, they are willing to do the work, and then they're continuing to find out about themselves, and they're not just gonna fake it. They're actually going to make it, because they're putting themselves in those positions by getting appropriate mentorship, getting coaching, getting all that stuff that they need. So I I guess there's two prongs, right? One prong is the person who needs a reference or needs the support or whatever. This is really important now because a lot of internships are going on for kids. There's a lot of shifting. Some are jobs, some are this, some are everything. Um, and there might be opportunities that you haven't even thought about, but you need to be always willing, like available. But for that person to be the coachable person. But for those of us who are on the other side of it and can offer assistance and help, my message, I think, in thinking about this conversation is to be how I would be helpful is to be accurately, intentionally supportive, right? And by that, I mean, um, I'm gonna just keep offering the same advice whether you take it or not, right? Like, "Oh, you still wanna go to medical school? Haven't done anything in the last 6 months? Okay, here's the things. Oh, maybe think about these same 3 things, same 3 things, same 4 things I've told you 100 times. It's this." And, and I think the hard part about it, which you mentioned, is, the acceptance, which is always hard, the acceptance that most people, 95% of them are not gonna do that. They're just not. Doesn't matter what echelon you're dealing with, it doesn't matter like that, but just 90 that's what they say, like 95% of life is showing up. It's true. It's true because most people aren't gonna take the suggestions. They're not gonna follow through on that. They're gonna ignore it. I don't know. And that's a mistake. It's a mistake. It's not that you have to do everything that someone tells you. Someone's like, "Oh, you do this, this, and this." No, but at least evaluate it. At least look at it. At least try, to get in there
Yeah.
and do something.
Yeah, so this sounds like a passionate piece of you, right? Of like,
Yeah.
because this is part of your identity and who you are, right?
Yeah.
When you feel like you have a gap in something, I see you attack it, right? Like you go in
100%.
and
Yes.
like do a deep dive in.
Well, especially if there's clarity about the distance, like, what
Yeah,
has to be done between 0 and 10.
for sure.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
sure.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess for me, if I were to say, like, who would I say to go get a reference from, Chris? It'd be someone like that. That is like,
Yeah.
that has that curiosity, that drive, that understanding that, I don't have everything I need yet. And I know I can get there. I just either need time, feed forward, and experience,
Right,
and
right.
and I think that that is the gap for you in this experience of someone wanting a reference for you. And here's where your decision lies is do you say yes or do you say no? And, we talked about this a little bit before. I'm like, maybe
Yeah.
it's just a slow fade of just like,
Right.
okay. And then like just let it go slide, quietly slip away. Who knows?
Yeah, because the other thing that I think is really important for people to think about in that is if you're gonna ask someone for a reference, I don't have any problem with someone, sketching out kind of a somewhat reference that they would like to have. Because that then I could say like, "Oh, this is what they're identifying as what's important.
Mm,
Can I get on board with that, yes or no?" And, I just take off what I don't like and put in what I do like, put in my words and make it, obviously my voice and my referral, but, um, yeah, I think you're right. It's a and the other thing about it is to I again, like, advice that you give is always when like, you're dating and you're not just if you're dating one person, you kinda like them okay, but you're like, "Alright, I just still need to, have more coffees and you're doing that, dating a lot of people. It's the same way with you can call it networking, you can call it whatever you want, getting references or just, meeting people. It's the kinda same thing. It's like, always be willing to talk to someone who's doing stuff that you want to be doing. And people love talking about themselves. They love talking about their work if they're into it. They love talking about their success if they've had it. I think for the most part, people are very generous with that because it's hits at their ego. It's like, oh yeah, I love this. I love this about me. Let me tell you how I did it. Or let me tell you what you need to do. Very few people are going to actually do it, but the people who are going to be that much more better off, but it's also, again, the other big picture in here, yes, passion to get someone who wants to see you grow and can, put those dots together for you, but also being the person who you say you are. Being the person who you say you are, right? Because on a resume, I've just went through this recently. On a resume, literally it says committed to professional growth. And that same person who's committed to professional growth has a little misstep, like a little mistake at their new job and quits. Well, to me, that's not being who you say you are. You say as a big highlight on the top of your resume that you're committed to professional growth and committed to, professional growth is I made a mistake. Dang. I really didn't want to do that. That sucked. And it will suck. It happens to all of us. But what am I going to do with that mistake? And don't put on your resume that you're committed to professional growth if you're not someone who can come back from mistakes that you undoubtedly will make, right? This is all part of a reference. If I'm reading that on a resume, I'm going to say, give me an example. What's your commitment to professional growth? And they're going to say like, oh, I took these classes or I went to this seminar. And I'm going to say, oh, that's really great. So what about when you had a difficult problem at work that you couldn't solve? Or what happens when you made a mistake? How did you grow from that? Because that is professional growth, not just like, going to a seminar and learning new pieces, right? Because you can layer all these things on with themselves, the knowledge base and but also
Sure.
the being who you are. Yeah.
Well, and I think what you're hitting on is these kind of general lines people use all the time that aren't necessarily true for them. And it's like,
Yes. Completely.
you look at them and you're like, okay, is that true for me? It sounds great, but is that really who I am? Is that how I
Mhm.
function? Is that how I move through life? If I want to move through life that way, then I have to change my behaviors and change my actions. But if I also know I am who I am and I'm comfortable with it, then you're just like, I better take that out because that's not representative of me. And
Right.
I think references are a commonplace for those things happen. Resumes are a commonplace for those things happen. And I think we're just like, okay. And there were some lines on resumes when I was going for resumes that I'm just like, it's just like, yeah, whatever. Like it's just like
Yeah.
everybody
You might
writes
as well
this.
just
And you're
add in
like,
my dog eats of this dog food.
yeah, I'm
Like,
like,
okay.
okay, great. That's not
It's
helpful.
not relevant
Right.
to me.
Yeah. So how does that apply? And it, to wrap up on this topic is like, what do we do as individuals when we're asked for a reference and we don't feel, you know, confident in giving the reference that we believe they're asking for? And I guess for me, after this conversation, I would say, um, before I give a reference, I want to share with you where I think you're at. And you tell me if you agree or disagree. And based on that, we can, decide to, move
Work
forward or
together or
not,
not.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And see, because if you want that from me, I'm going to give you this first, and then you decide
Yes.
you still want that. And that would be, yeah, I think I would make that my policy now. So that was really
Mhm.
interesting to kind of move through that. What about you, Chris? Like, where are you?
Yeah, it's
Where
actually
where where
I'm
where are you going after this conversation?
almost well, it's similar to you and mine I would add. So mine would be often I'll ask, "Oh, could you give me a reference will you give me a reference?" So I'm like, "Yeah, sure, but give me the job description that you're applying for and your resume. What's the package that goes together here? What does it look like right now?" And then to your point, yeah, I would say, "I'm happy to give you a reference, but first let's do a little mock of an interview. Let me, take 10, 15 minutes and interview you." And so you can be interviewing for my reference. And not as a not as a, like, I'm not gonna do it, but just to prepare you because I'm gonna say certain things to them, and they're going to probably ask you about that, or they're gonna be thinking that you have this, and you need to be able to back it up and all that too. But, yeah, I think after this especially, it's one is if someone just asks me like, "Hey, can you support me, or can you give me a reference," or whatever, and it doesn't have any deadline, or there's no specific person, or they just need more leads or something, I'll be like, sure, I guess if love to help. How about that? Love to help, which is true. That's
Yeah,
true.
that is
I
so
would
true
love to
about
help.
you. Yeah.
Whether I can or not whether I will or not is up for debate because I have not been given, I think my biggest advice for people asking for a reference, though, would really say, here's my ducats, whatever I have, here's my whatever, my book that I wrote or my resume. Would you look this over and could you give me an outstanding reference, from where you are? And that is a much more powerful conversation to say yes or no. And even those of us who are on the other side, just being honest, being, straightforward, being clear, and also remembering what's the point of being a reference? The point of being a reference is to be helpful. Is your point just to get them the job? Well, then that's fine. That's on you. I don't take it that way because I'm about personal growth. I'm about being better tomorrow than you were today. I'm about knowing yourself. I'm about, accepting what is and then not just trying to finagle it, but using that to get better, right? So all of that is led to by, can you give me an outstanding reference? No. This is why. So let's talk about it. Let's see if we can get to the outstanding reference. Or, yes, of course I can. And why don't you give me the job description and your resume and let's have a mock little informational interview so I can give you an idea about what I would say based on what's here. And then you can kind of relate to me what you think is relevant, what you think is important. And that's like a really, and to your point, either as we close out, it's that that's not done enough. And I feel like there are those of us who have had careers, have interviewed plenty of people, have worked on teams, managed teams, all the things that you're talking about, started our own businesses, et cetera, et cetera. And we're in a great position to support the youth. And after I just came out of that a very powerful award ceremony that I was just at this week. It was so inspiring, Rach, because it was filled with kids who may or may not have had a chance but for this school, right? Like hadn't had a chance. I mean, the opportunities that they're being given, the schools that they're going to, the engineering majors that they're studying. It's just insane. And you see the power of mentorship, of opportunity, of identifying talent. And if all of us can be responsible for that a little bit too in laying that groundwork, this is a very powerful space to be. We talked about it a little bit before, even in graduation advice and everything. It's just being able to, you know, to weave in your um, kind of your public service into your life, not just using it as two separate things. So yeah, very, very powerful. Grateful all day long. Okay, so Rach, now I'm gratefully not going to give some references. I'm gratefully going to keep working with the people who are doing all the great things. So I'm like, hey, I'm at this. So they're still doing it. So grateful for them, honestly, because that
Yeah.
it's very it's empowering and it's very satisfying. I think I'm on
Yes.
my side to do that. So I love it. Thank you very much. This has been I would give you a reference, Rach. I would say that you are solid very solid referral partner for me, and I appreciate you so much. So this has been, is, and forever will be the Grateful Not Greedy podcast. I'm just going to remind everyone that you can certainly give us a reference anytime. We appreciate it. Tell your friends, colleagues, your neighbors that there's this great podcast called Grateful Not Greedy that you've been listening to. We would really appreciate the reference. So with that, aloha, Rach.
Aloha, Chris.